Oh, what's up, Cod Smacks? Funny story. So I did off the episode yesterday, and then while everything was uploading, I sent, and silly me for this, I fell asleep like a normal human being, and then I woke up and my computer had shut down. Everything was deleted, along with my notes. So. I tell you, what's more fun than doing this once a day is doing this shit 2 times a fucking day. Oh, it's almost like, DW's up there himself looking down at me going, oh, okay, Liam, are you sure you really want to do this? Yeah, well, I'm going to make it as painful as I possibly can. So for that, thank you, DW Prowse. I appreciate it. Given that I have already done this once and I have lost my notes on it, I'm going to make sure everyone is nice and caught up. But this is going to be like a speed round of sorts. I'm not going to go too crazy with stuff. There's also a fairly big appendix in this chapter. Hey, okay. Last going off, we were talking about we were getting into the colonies, people in the New World, blah blah blah. Meow meow meow. Oh yeah, and everything going into decline. Everybody fucking up. Cool. So right at the beginning here, I have a quote on page 120 that says. The conditions of the time, that anyone paying £100 is to have half a harbour on the north side of Trinity Bay and stages of room with firm use and revenues and 1,000 acres of land. For £200, a whole harbour in Trinity Bay, 4,000 acres north of Trinity Harbour, and stage room for 2 rooms at revenues and firm use. Other amounts paid to obtain benefits proportionally. This is kind of the way things were at the time, as far as I know. And then there's a note here at the bottom. We're just kind of getting to the end of the chapter here. So one of the final notes is that in the latter part of King James I's reign, a very important point about fishery rights in the plantations began to be agitated. It raised the whole question as to the absolute authority of the crown over the colonies, and had a dire effect on the Stuart dynasty being the royal family and shit like that. So the Plymouth Company, so these are the companies, these are guys on the ground. The Plymouth Company claimed the right to charge the English ship fishermen who frequented the coast a license fee equal to 83 cents per ton, and forbade vessels engaged in commerce to enter any port along the entire coast without liability to seizure and confiscation, and such punishment for the captain and crew as the council thought proper to inflict. So what we had here, there's a bit of tension that was coming in between like the king and the plantation guys, the colonies there at the time. And what we're going to see for the very first time here is the colonies starting to butt heads with the crown over some of the laws now. So there's, just trying to keep it straight in my head now. So there's the planters, like the original guys, and then there's the colonies, and then there's the crown. Okay, so there's sort of 3 groups at the time. So here it says, just at the end of the chapter here, on the ascension of Charles I, the Commons passed a bill for the maintenance and increase of shipping and navigation for the liberty of fishing in Newfoundland, Virginia, and New England. The bill was thrown out by the court party in the Lords. On this, the Lords is like just a session. Out by the court party in the Lords. On this, the Commons refused to grant the king a subsidy. It was one of the first difficulties between Charles and Parliament. Now, we just jumped from King James I to King Charles I, James, blah, blah, blah. Charles, another historical shitheel. King Charles I, not such a great guy, as we're going to find. And things get a little tingle-tangly in the old Parliament. Just want to make sure I didn't miss anything here, because my notes are gone. This fucking sucks. I hate it. Brother agreements for Parliament discussion. Rules of conversation defended the patent's right as monstrous monopoly. Yeah, so basically it was just, there was a monopoly going on at the time, and they didn't think it too fair. This is where we get into the appendix for chapter 5, which I'm gonna call Pissed Off Hyperloop. Appendix chapter 5. So I mean, it just I'm gonna kind of just try and dispute it. Listen, it's just some letters that some people wrote to King James. It's, I mean, also, who starts paragraphs with words like and we? Well, we is okay. Also, and more and. I don't know, I thought these guys were English. Anyhow. So, I mean, there's just all kinds of crap here. I mean, I could just throw a dart at any of this. It's all boring. And a bunch of it is in Spanish. That shall be one body or community perpetual and shall have perpetual possession and one common seal, that they and their successors shall be known as the Treasurer and Company of Adventurers and Planters of the City of London and Bristol for the colony or plantation in Newfoundland, and that they, their successors, shall be from henceforth. And the company may cause to be made a coin to pass current between the people inhabiting in these territories for the more ease traffic and bargaining between amongst in such nature, and his commission in that behalf all officers, governors, and ministers formally appointed shall be discharged straight like, commanding them in every upon resident in the colony on their allergy. All persons being our subjects, she shall go and inhabit within any perspective of the liberties of free denizens and natural subjects within any of our other dominions to all intents and purposes, as if were provided, and we shall do hereby declare to all Christians, kings, princes, and states, blah, 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 holy fuck, letters from Cupids. Master John Guy, his letter to Master Slaney, treasurer to the council of the Newfoundland plantation, right worshipful, it may please you to understand that the bark of northern called the constant Arud there in Newfoundland, notwithstanding that a ship of Bristol called the Lioness harbors upon a platform made of great posts and rails, the poles, and just Jesus, guys, letters from Fairyland. Of 4'8" to the roof or a half story, the roof over the hall I covered with deal boards. And the rest of the hatch I found growing here about the harbor as sedge flaggers and rushes and fair batter covering. My comfort is that the Lord is with your honor and your designees, for we have prospered in the Don Edward Wynne boundaries, and says the patent of ye shall provide contains the entire portion of land. Formation. Oof. In 1627, he made his first visit to Newfoundland to see how bad matters really were, but only stayed a few weeks. Oh, God. 17. Oh, look! A section about Beothics, where we actually mention, we have a sort of a early written description of the Beothics. They are, he says, of middle-sized, broad-chested, and very erect. They go bareheaded, erect. They go bareheaded, wearing their hair somewhat long. Behind they have a great lock of hair plaited with feathers, like a hawk's lore, with a feather on it standing upright by the crown of the head, with a small lock plaited before. They wore a short gown or cassock made of stag skins, the fur innermost, that came down to the middle of the leg, with sleeves in the middle of their arm and a bearskin about the neck. Their hair was diverse, some black, some brown, some yellow. Some of their wigwams were covered with skins. They had other square-shaped houses covered in canvas obtained by some Christians, probably the Biscayans, who had also given them hooks and copper utensil in which they kept very bright. So I suppose we do have some description of the Beothics. Unfortunately, this appendix is so long that we're going to move right along to the next chapter. Chapter 6, the reign of King Charles I. So at the beginning of all the chapters, again, we have during the reign of King Charles I, we have some important year dates of note. All right, so the reign of King Charles I, or we might just start calling him King Charles the Shitty. He reigned from 1625 to 1649. So in 1625, we have the capture of 27 Newfoundland ships and 200 persons by Turkish pirates. Turkish pirates? If the Turks got over here, how come we can't fucking find India? We're looking for a passage to India this whole time. We got Turkish pirates on the go. I mean, fucking figure it out, guys. I don't know. Follow them back or something. Or, I don't know, get caught. Escape. I don't know. It's probably a lot more difficult than easier said than done. Anyway, 1626. 350 families of English settled between Cape Race and Bonavista. 250 English vessels fishing in Newfoundland. Whitburn's appeal for a government post as inspector of provisions. A couple more, blah, blah, blah. 1629. Baltimore's priests come to England under assumed names. Weird. He again prays for a ship to protect the settlements, complains of Staunton, and asks for a grant in Virginia and permission to move his family and dependents there. Baltimore abandoned Newfoundland, founded Maryland in Virginia. I don't think it's any surprise to anybody where the name of the city Baltimore in Maryland comes from at this point. If it is a surprise, I'm glad I've been able to do that for you. Just in that, it's worth mentioning that I think we do get to it a little bit down the road, but when it talks about Baltimore praying for ships, it's just because shit's going down. Things aren't like he needs more permanent ships, would mean more permanent settlement, more. It's just like a fucking bailout plan almost. He needs more to keep everything worth being there, worth on being on the go. Oh God! I also just woke up, so please bear with me if I'm up and then down, and in and out. Okay. In 1633, Charles I, through the Star Chamber, not entirely sure what the Star Chamber is, but I think it's either a physical chamber, this may be worth Wikipediaing, it's either a physical chamber or some kind of charter. I think it's a kind of charter, maybe, or a newspaper. I don't think it's a newspaper, but the Star Chamber sounds like the name for a newspaper. Charles I, through the Star Chamber, made a celebrated code of regulations for the government of Newfoundland fishery, establishing fishing admirals. The first skipper arriving from England to be the judge or vice admiral for that fishing season. The proclamation for the observance of Sunday in Newfoundland. So we gotta go to church on Sundays, and basically the first guy who shows up in a harbor for the fishing season becomes the admiral, which sounds responsible. In 1638, we have the arrival of Sir D. Kirk in Fairyland. I figure his name is going to pop up again. In 1639, Pompon de Bellièvre complains of Kirk's collection of taxes from French subjects. Bishop of Exeter and others petition against Kirk's letter to Laud. Not entirely sure who Laud is. So that sounds like an English clergyman who went down to collect money and fuck over the French. Cool. In 1640, further complaints against Kirk dismissed, and John Dowring, senior, appointed governor by patentees. Memorandum about Dutch trading in Newfoundland. A little bit of Dutch action. So, man, we got the Dutch showing up. We got Turkish pirates. Fucking international stage here, boys. In 1642, civil war between Charles and the Parliamentary Party. I think we get to that down the road. And then 1643, first cargo of fish sent from Boston to Bilbao in Spain. 1645, first vessel sent from Boston to fish at Bay Bulls, seized by a royal cruiser. In 1646, Trueworg married Miss Spencer of Newbury, Massachusetts. Not sure why that's important. 1647, Governor Withrop records a great storm in Newfoundland. All right, that's not going to be the first one. 1649, letter from Charles to Kirk about asylum for Lady Hawkins. I guess that was maybe someone. Kirk offers the king an asylum in Newfoundland. Trial and execution of the king. Commonwealth cruisers sent to defend the fishing ships against Prince Rupert. Kirk only allowed to take to Newfoundland sufficient men to man his ships. So, spoiler alert, 1649. King Charles I is executed. Cool. Now, I'm sure we'll jump back in time a whole bunch, probably right back to King James I, and then work our way up to, I guess, what will be 1649. So a quote here on page 135 is 135, we're getting through this pretty quick. The short and troubled reign of this unfortunate king is, and probably always will be, the battleground for a fierce political discussion between monarchists and republicans, cavaliers and roundheads. Our colonial records throw a vivid sidelight on this disastrous period. The treatment of our unfortunate island by Charles I the treatment of the island by Charles I was uniformly cruel, tyrannical, and stupid. In every way, the interest of the patentees, the courtiers, the patentees, the guys who went over with patents to explore, settle, colonize land, the patentees was preferred to the welfare of the planters. Charles, like his father James I, was influenced entirely by his personal feelings for his immediate adherents, whilst he defended and perpetuated the absurd monopoly of the Plymouth Company in New England against the rights and claims of English merchants and fishermen. He pursued an exactly opposite course in Newfoundland. So, I want to kind of make sure I got this right. So, he defended the company's so in New England, he defended the rights of fishermen and stuff against the settled companies there. Does that make sense? Like the guys would be around fishing, and there was the settled up like companies, colonies, and stuff like that. Do we should like pay to this? So in New England, he would defend the planters or the regular fishermen's rights in regards to the dealings of the companies. In Newfoundland, it was the opposite. So he didn't defend the companies against the rights of our planters and stuff like that, which was going to be a problem. So the king carried out his policy towards this colony deliberately from good, honest men, well acquainted with the island, settlers who had lived there. He received the very best advice as to how the colony should be governed and settlement encouraged. Sir William Vaughan, his intimate friend and staunch supporter of royalty, in his Golden Fleece says, "Many ships from Newfoundland taken by Moorish pirates. More confusion amongst fishermen of Newfoundland than any other for want of being sufficiently guarded. King James did about 3 years past see into the discomforts and directed a commission of the suit of the corporations." Remember when I said that all the pirates and stuff were fucking up and they needed more ships there? So this is like a petition. We talked about the petition for that. Pirates were fucking around big time, and the king, they were like, "Hey, king, come defend our shit." And he also urges that he was like, and also like we want to keep the ships, like we don't want to just like deal with this and send them back. Like we need like permanent settlement in here in the winter and stuff. The pirates a few years before had pillaged them to the extent of 40,000 pounds, besides 100 pieces of ordnance, and had taken away 1,500 mariners to the hurt of Newfoundland and the planters. Vaughan urges the ship should be retained in both peace and war, winter, summer. It's all just like arguments for helping the colony. Like he's like, come on, man, like we're doing this. Saying that it maintains 8,000 people for 6 months of the year, all the trade and stuff. The benefit, and he states, the benefits of a colony would be to restrain our own fishermen, ship fishers, who seize on one another's stages. It will serve to restrain their insolence who brag that they were here by west and by law. Organization of a colony would prevent the depredations of the ship fishermen, firing the woods, stealing salt and fish, casting ballast into the harbors, blah, 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 blah. Set up some fucking towns and, we can have individual rights and stuff. I think I'm getting this. I don't feel like I'm getting this, but maybe if you're getting it, great. I'm just trying to stay one step ahead of you guys. Charles doesn't give a shit about Newfoundland, basically, is what we're getting at here. Charles sucks. Oh, look! Here's some pictures of Topsail Head, Salmon Cove, and the Goulds. But here at the bottom, you actually see that it says the Goulds near Abridges. So maybe the Goulds did used to rule? That would be big, wouldn't it? Like, it's a lot bigger than a little town out there between, Kilbride and Bay Bulls. But, that I found almost more interesting than anything I've read so far. Here we have, in this section, page 137, it's called Hayman's Proposition. So this fella, Hayman, he succeeded John Mason. Remember John Mason? He was the governor. Hayman succeeded John Mason as the governor of Guy's colony. The one 1620s kind of fell apart before the 1630s, before it turned into Falklands land and all that stuff. We're doing this. One part of the company seems to have separated from the colony at Seafrost, Cupids, and formed a plantation of colony at Harbour Grace, which they named Bristol's Hope. So the foundation, Harbour Grace, Bristol's Hope. We learned from Mason's letter that he had been fishing for room or plantation there, and in 1697, we're so close to being out of the 1600s for the first time, so that their harbour was the first place settled in the country by the English, and a man had died. Oh yeah, so this is interesting, a little bit, not too interesting. Not for me this early in the fucking day. Oh God, I gotta do this again later. We learned that from Mason's letter, that he had a fishing room or a plantation there, and in 1697, the inhabitants told Abbé Baudin that their harbour, in Bristol's Hope there or whatever, was the first place settled in the country by the English, that a man had died there in 1693 or 1694 at the age of 83. He might possibly be the son of one of Guy's first settlers, but in all probability he was a descendant of one of the original planters long anterior to Guy's arrival. Most likely, so just some early on names here. He was most likely a Davis, a Thistle, a Pike, a Pin, a Crawley, or a Parsons. So shout out to our original six. The oldest families in the Bay metropolis at the time. So Hayman proposes some shit to the king as the governor. I just have a quote here, 137. Part of his proposal, as a paragraph just in it, he says, in this island at one time I lived 15 months together and... Let me start again. In this island at one time I lived 15 months together, and since I have spent almost every summer in it. I had lots of time being an overseer and no labor to do. But seeing to my grief the poor support of the diverse fucking buys, read over by some, liked by some, derided by others, and neglected by almost all. He's talking about people like the planters. Neglected by almost all, and these few have either insufficiently begun or have been deluded and wronged by those they employed or mistaken. No, sorry, not talking about the planters, talking about the employers. The employers there at the time, the guys who were hiring just regular Joe fishermen. God, this is getting tangly. I'll go back a little bit. And by these few have either insufficiently begun or have been deluded or wronged by those they employed or mistaken in good meaning, or have not been able to spread or out of heart with poor lout unsupported returns or demands of new supplies. Now, I half think that that's not me reading poorly. I think that maybe even for the time, this guy just had a stupid way with words, and that's a hill I'm gonna fucking die on right now. That unless your majesty sadly assists with the costly business is the whole thing's an advantage. It's the long fucking story short is that we need a little bit more control. The colony guys need to be able to, they need a bit more support, and they need to be able to, have a little bit more rule of law in terms of their employees and how they do business and how everything's going to go, how everyone's cut is going to work. Things are just getting a little too jingle jangle. He wants the king's help, and he makes another claim that this sort of thing worked for Ireland. It's worked before, boosting it up. He's talking like New England, hey, Vaughan is basically just saying yo, king, let's do what already works if you don't mind. Last couple of points here. Hayman then enumerates the products of the country. So he's just saying, again, man, we're good with pitch, tar, timber, fish, etc. Newfoundland is a land worth possessing, he says. There is rich fishing near this land called the Bank, where yearly 400 French ships fish and are from whence your subjects have never reaped any. So now what he's saying is man, we got I think he's talking about the Grand Banks probably. And he's saying man, this is where you've got this it's just money on the table, dude. There's 400 French ships over there off the coast every year. We're not doing anything with it. You're letting this whole fucking thing fall apart. Would you please, show us some fucking love here, man? So then in 1625, the Commons passed a bill for the maintenance and increase of shipping and navigation and for liberty of fishing in Newfoundland, Virginia, and New England. The bill was thrown out by Charles' party in the House of Lords. Fucking course it was. The Commons refused the subsidy and Parliament was dissolved in anger. The question of free fishery was one of the causes which led to hostility between Charles and Parliament. So we actually played a pivotal role in a lot of Charles' major issue between the English government the royals. In Newfoundland, he gave an exclusive monopoly of the island fishery to the western adventurers or ship fishermen from Devonshire against the settlers in the island. Most tyrannical laws were enacted for their governance, from which the English fishermen, by express enactment, were to be at all times exempted. These laws will be found in the appendix to this chapter under the head of Star Chamber Rules. That is basically our last note here. I did make one other thing here. Like I said, I jotted it all down with pencil for at least to get this part done. He made a rule. This is what I was talking about right at the end there. So he made a rule that the first, I've got him here. I'll jump into the last page. Yeah, so he made 4 basically big rules for the Newfoundland fishery, which is kind of dumb. And that was the first guy to show up in the harbor would be the fishing admiral and sort of like judge and rulemaker for that fishing season, which, talk about early bird gets the worm. So it says here, I'll just read down through it. The extraordinary provision of these regulations, making the first rude English skipper who entered a harbor the admiral and judge over all the fishing season, seems to us in this age a monstrous anomaly. But it was, as the rules declare, this was an ancient custom. You used to be able to say the first guy to show up in the harbor could be the fishing admiral for the season, but it wasn't the season. It was supposed to be like fucking week to week, because these are super old rules and weren't supposed to be applied to a whole fucking government system. And it's just like, and the French actually did the same. So the English enacted this old custom on the new sort of way of doing things, and the French did it too. So the French also said that they were going to be like the fucking, the English and French are going to start getting at it, right? So they're both doing this thing where the first guy to come to a harbor can be the first one to be the admiral, and if the French actually wrote down the rules for it, which it says, the first who shall arrive and send his boat to the harbor shall call le Havre or le Petit Maître. They'll have the choice and to take the space of the ground necessary for his fishery. He shall then put up the place called the scaffold of the grapple, a bill signed by him stating the day of his arrival and the harbor which he's chosen. All other masters on their arrival shall go send to the same place and then write down on the same bill the day of their arrival, their number of their men, and their name of their harbor and place which they have chosen in proportion to the birth of their ships and the number of the mariners. The captain that arrives first shall cause the bill or placard to be guarded by one of his men, who shall remain upon the place until all the masters that have made their declaration, which afterwards shall be put into his hands. No master or mariners may settle in any harbor or station till they have made their declaration in the form aforesaid, nor shall they disturb any other master in choice that he may have made under the penalty of 500 livres, which I think is the French currency at the time. We're just ending on the note that King Charles sucks, and he made some pretty dumb rules about the first guy, like any fucking like fisherman, the first guy to show up in a harbor, the fishing season can be the boss, versus what the colony guys wanted, which was and so he gave this like monopoly to all the fishermen, like in the harbor or whatever, they were the master, whereas the colony guys wanted to be like, no, we want to set up like boundaries, colonies here, make this more, and then everyone can feed out of that. So this made things extremely tangly, especially when you consider that the French were doing the exact same thing at the same time. So there's going to be clashes with English-French, there's going to be disputes over harbors, all this stuff. And I'm going to leave you on that note. And I guess, that said, I'll see you later today. Thank you guys for listening to this chunk of the program, or whatever the fuck this is. Let's just call it my torture. Okay, cool. That was pages 120 to 140 of Liam Small Abridges, A History of Newfoundland by D.W. Prowse, 20 pages at a time, until the bars reopen. Thank you guys so much. Have a lovely afternoon. I will see you fucking tonight. Oh, God. What?